The hack and slash dungeon crawling extraction games, the ones that we are able to play, are kind of few and far between. So few, in fact, that given the history of the games that we've been able to play or attempted to play or that have been marketed to players that love this kind of game, it almost always feels like an asset rip. Greed is Good went poof in the matter of a month or two. And now Dungeonborn, who hasn't seen an update since September, ended up abandonware without saying it was actually abandonware. Seriously. That game is actually dead. The only tried and true staple in this genre of games has been Dark and Darker, but there's another one coming along. A while back, when Dark and Darker first went live on Steam, Bellular did a video about how there was a major screw-up in Dad's marketing, and in the course of that video, he ended up mentioning a game called Legacy Steel and Sorcery, a video game that his friends were working on, a PvEVP extraction hack and slash game made by Notorious Studios. Oh, and hey, if you end up liking these kinds of videos from me, maybe sub the channel, that'd be awesome, or maybe come by a stream sometime over at twitch.tv/onepeg, you know, if you're feeling frisky. Anyway, since then, I've had an opportunity to not only play Legacy, but to also interview a couple of the developers and play several iterations of their open playtests. And I'm not gonna lie, at the start, it was pretty rough. The netcode needed a lot of work, both for PvE and PvP. Skills needed a major balance check, and likely will for some time, and it was pretty bare bones. But since that first time playing the game, there has been a ton of improvement. The point of this video is to introduce you all to a game that I believe might actually have some staying power in the genre with its different flavor, what I like and what I don't. As of now, Legacy has concluded their playtests and they're pushing for their early access launch, which takes place on February 12th at 11 a.m. PST, 2 p.m. EST, 7 p.m. GMT. If you're in a different time zone than that, you'll have to do the math. The basic package is $24.99, mid-tier is $49, and the largest supporter pack is $59. And you can see a breakdown of the perks for each one here. I want to put a big old asterisk here that's saying my reviewing and informing of this title for you all is being done in a way where this game is releasing into early access for a very small dev studio. That means the game is not feature complete, will likely have bugs, and you are buying this game if you decide to do so knowing full well that this game is still in an incomplete phase of its development. I just want to make sure everyone understands that's where I'm trying to keep my perspective so it doesn't sound like I'm glazing them or being overly critical depending on which side you're on or whatever. Legacy, as I already mentioned, is in the same vein of Dark and Darker, although it isn't necessarily as dark and gloomy. Instead, at least for this first map, it's much more open and airy with opportunities to venture indoors and underground depending on where you travel to. Now, I'm not entirely sure how many players are able to be on a map at once. I'm gonna guess it's somewhere around 12 to 16, but the game offers a solo mode and a mixed mode with teams of up to 3, and there is also the option for an arena mode that they are looking to implement, although I don't know if it'll be available upon the early access launch. There are currently 4 classes to choose from, with more to come in the future, which are Priest, Warrior, Ranger, and Rogue. Each class is broken up into different unique variants based not only on the weapons that you decide to wield, but also variants of skills you choose from, consumables you decide to bring, and even the armor you decide to wear. For example, the Priest class, which is what I've basically played right all along, has an AoE stun spell that does holy damage, but there are other variants that can target friendly players that will stun stuff around a friendly target, and another one that goes out in a straight line that stuns anything it comes across, which is something that you choose in your skill expression when you decide a variant of that spell that you want. You just have to level up into it. There are also armor pieces that will change certain abilities that you have, like one that makes projectiles passing through the priest's magic mirror do additional damage, or another one that makes the priest's holy orb spell use spirit, which is the priest's healing energy, and do damage to enemies, but also heal anyone standing inside of the explosion radius for that spell. The priest, for weapon variants, has a scepter that fires little homing projectiles. That's kind of like the default weapon. And you can hold the button down to charge up a few of them and do extra damage instead, kind of like releasing a missile salvo. But they also have a staff that if you hold down the attack button does this beam attack that uses mana, or if you left click, sends out these light waves that do pretty big damage. Lastly, the priest also gets a buckler and sword that they could use instead, where instead of the Q ability, which did cast a heal, no longer does that, but instead self-casts a damage amp that makes their melee attacks hit harder, which, if you combine that with the piece of armor that makes the holy orb suddenly do healing, ends up working out pretty well in that case. There are also an assortment of vendors where you can buy reagents and craft armor, weapons, jewelry, and other consumables that level up based on purchases you make and crafts you complete with them. Weapons and armor even get sockets and their own weapon skills to further add variance to the builds. And then you even have your own hideout, which is what Legacy refers to as the Lodge, a place where you can, for example, give yourself a temporary buff using a cooking pot that you first have to craft in order to use. Aesthetically, Legacy provides a much brighter and vibrant world than what we're used to in this genre, and also makes use of an art style synonymous with the history of the dev team, who are people that come from the OG World of Warcraft medicine days at Blizzard, as well as folks that originated with Riot in the early League of Legends days. You can see this reflected in the artwork, which is something I've been a fan of for a very long time. I've always loved this art style. Insofar as combat, if you have a shield, you can block attacks pretty well, but the blocking isn't very angular. It's kind of like if you have the shield up and it's pointed in the direction of the attack, the shield blocks it. Although the shield does have a limit. The shield block has a stamina bar that can be broken by enough attacks, which forces the person blocking to stagger, and well then, you get some free hits on them. Otherwise, you have the ability to dodge, which uses this green stamina bar that looks like the spitting image of the one from the latest two Zelda games. If that runs out, you become exhausted and you turn bright orange, a status that everyone gets to see and will punish. PvP in this game feels kinda great, in a way. It's kinda like if WoW PvP were something that you had to aim, similar to mechanics like in the game Smite, with the different weapons giving you different attack options combined with a mix of consumables and perks. There's a ton of build variants. PvE feels the same. The active dodge works well now, which it did not in the early testing days. The enemies go from being kinda dumb to things that you really have to actively avoid in order to not get crushed. They do serious amounts of damage to you if you get hit. And the mob density is enough to where you're overwhelmed at times for those adrenaline moments, but still gives you enough room to find a spot to heal up if you really, really need to. The map flows in a way where you have these wider open spaces with minimal monsters and the occasional mid-tier baddie, to delving into dungeon-like areas with treasure, larger, more dangerous monsters, and then you can even venture into sets of ruins and larger caves and layers that house very tough living armor mobs, wraiths, and massive trolls with clubs looking to smash. For people looking to be more on the farming end of things, you have the ability to evade and skirt places in order to do things like mining, herbing, logging, and for the adventurous types, you have plenty of mob variants and mob diversity to keep you going, in addition to hunting other players. Audio-wise, I found the directional audio to be spot on. I think that the first-person footstep sounds were a little loud, but other than that, the audio was always right. The game is created in Unreal 5 and honestly pushes PCs a little hard without frame generation on if you have it cranked all the way up. On Ultra, the lighting, shadows, and particle effects they built into the game, although having a slightly cartoonish look to them, still look beautiful. However, I was only getting about 80-85 FPS on Ultra settings with my 13900K, DDR7200, and 4090, unless I turned on frame gen, in which case I could run DLAA and saw 100 FPS or so with the quality upscaling. So graphically, it's a little unoptimized still. That's to be expected with an EA title release, I think. Graphics at medium for me, though, were not much of a problem. Had really, really great frames then. So people on older tech should still be able to enjoy this one. Okay, the verdict. Honestly, I was surprised they had the inclusion of so many systems in the game that they have at this point in their development. The PvP in the game feels good. The wombo combos that you can pull off on people feel really good. And the class diversity, even though there's only 4 classes, all feel really fleshed out with enough build variants to shift you between roles depending on what you're trying to do. The netcode, in my opinion, feels okay, but still definitely has some work for it to feel really right. But my testing of the game was taken from a slightly older build than the EA release build, which is addressing some of the netcode things that I was seeing, so I'm still holding out hope on that one. The camera is over the shoulder, though. And while I'm more used to this style of camera for a game like this due to my very long history with games like WoW, and maybe this is just the art style here that I'm so used to with this combo of camera and this art style being used, but historically I've not been a fan of over-the-shoulder cameras. I've kind of been critical of that right from the start. You can go back and look at my first review of this. For hack and slash games like this, I much prefer first person for the immersive nature of it, as well as the ability to have a little bit more skill expression in the games that you're playing because you can just direct your melee attacks then. The pacing of the game feels good, although I do feel like certain animations are missing. Like when you climb up on rocks and whatnot, there's no mantling animation for the characters as of yet. And I'd like to see them actually doing some climbing as opposed to just kind of like gliding up on top of the surface of these boulders and stuff, but that'll probably come in time. All that being said, I gotta be honest, I'm actually kind of stoked about this game coming out on EA. I'm definitely gonna be playing it, and maybe I'll see some of you guys in there. Who knows? But anyway, that's all I have for this one, guys. Thank you so much for coming and checking out the video, everyone. I really, really do appreciate it. Thank you for lending me your eyeballs. Like I said, maybe sub the channel, maybe come and see me over on Twitch. If none of that works for you, maybe I'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll see you soon. Peace.